How do you think? Hard time helping you with that question.
But it is strange.
All right, let's get started here. What are we waiting for? There we go. Hi, good evening. Welcome to Majors and Quinn. My name is Michael. I'm one of the booksellers here, and I'm so pleased you're joining us to celebrate Poetry Night with Margaret Hasse and Joyce Sutphen. Tonight you will hear from Margaret and Joyce reading from works new and old and conversing as only poets can. Then there will be time at the end of the program for our audience to ask questions as only our audience can. After the Q&A, please allow the authors to move to the signing table, which is the glass display case you passed on your way into the store. You may want to line up there to say hello and get signed copies of their books. If you buy a book here this evening, you are not only supporting the authors, but also a locally owned independent bookstore, and we cannot thank you enough. One way you can thank us is by silencing your cell phones. I will pause now. All right. And now let me introduce our guests. Margaret Hasse's poetry has been published widely, including in 6 full-length books, 2 chapbooks, a new and selected collection in journals, anthologies, and, remarkably, in St. Paul's sidewalks and on public transit. Her work as a poet has received recognition through a National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship, Loft McKnight Awards, Minnesota State Arts Boards of Grants, and other honors. Margaret has lived in St. Paul for almost 40 years with her husband, David, where they raised their 2 sons, Michael and Alex. Joyce Sutphen grew up on a farm in Minnesota. She earned a PhD in Renaissance drama, as many farm girls do, from the University of Minnesota, and has taught British literature and creative writing at Gustavus Adolphus College in St. Peter, Minnesota. Her first collection of poems, Straight Out of View, won the Barnard Women's Poets Prize. Subsequent collections include Coming Back to the Body, Naming the Stars, First Words, and Carrying Water to the Field. She has received a McKnight Artist Fellowship and a Minnesota State Arts Board Fellowship and was named Minnesota's Poet Laureate in 2011. Please welcome Joyce Sutphen and sassy, classy Margaret Hasse.
That introduction, Michael. People ask me how to pronounce my name, and I usually say sassy, but now I'm working on classy or lassie, something else like that rhymes. I really appreciate the opportunity to read to you tonight at Majors and Quinn, and that you'd all come out and be together tonight. I know that others of you are just devastated or confused about the election results, although I don't want to exclude anybody from the poems who might have voted the other way than I did. But I chose some of the poems specifically to kind of recognize that we need a little, comfort or looking to the future or recovering of our hope, something like that. And by the way, can you hear me? The mic is pretty far away from me, but I kind of like it if I don't poof into it. So, yeah, you're all right. So Joyce, I'm so glad to be reading with Joyce. We're both celebrating new books. So I wanted to have her show the cover too. Mine is called Belongings, and it's a new and selected. And Joyce's is really beautiful, Home Words. So Home Words and Belonging. And also the titles just sort of suggest
Home Words and Belonging.
Yeah, a kind of a sense of belonging, because I think that we have to remember that even with the result of the election, if it was horrific to us, we still belong to ourselves, we still belong to our communities, we still belong to love and hope, that even dashed hope that it will be fulfilled. So I'll begin reading 2 recently made poems that have a relationship to the election. One I wrote for Jill, a friend who's here tonight, and the second poem, actually more positive than mine, is by Thomas R. Smith, a poet who lives just over the border in Wisconsin. My poem is called The Poem You Asked for Jill. A bead of light makes its way across the early morning sky, An airplane trails sound behind it like a dragon's tail. 1 week before elections, all things seem portentous of ruin. Wet leaves, the ache in the belly full of news that doesn't nourish. Where we stand on issues matters little now, only votes count. When can we rest and release bewilderment and our feral anger from the cage of our chest? It could be soon or not in our lifetime. What can we do now but wait and gaze at faraway places closer to being eternal? Stars and our sun, and tonight the waning crescent moon, a thing that slips through our fingers, needle thin, disappearing, yet it will rise and grow again to reveal pathways through the dark. And the other poem is by, is the one that is more positive than mine, and I wish I'd written it, but our wonderful Thomas R. Smith, many of you might know his poetry too. It's called We'll Take Care of Each Other. Everything is a little damaged now, even the things you buy new, like a book or a chair. Long lines at the return counter. The country is a little damaged too, or maybe a lot. People's ability to speak honestly stunned by threat, even churches preaching the gospel of force. Best turn away from the gambling dens of the pollsters, twist the radio knob to cut off loud voices in mid-sentence. Walk down some quiet street in your town that's loved you. Trust the kindnesses received, and especially the kindness you've given. That goodness can't be voted out of your heart. Thank you, Thomas R. Smith. And my friend Joan Johnson sent me another poem. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it set me up to decide what poems I was going to read to you tonight. And it's called No Matter Who Wins. And it's an assemblage poem by Rebecca Faulkner. And I'm reading just the first stanza. I mean, it's a poem that's assembled from various phrases that she read. And so it looks on the page like this, you know, kind of gathering the words together in kind of not a jumbled way, but a more rough way. No matter who wins, I won't give up. I will live lightly on the land, wave to passing cars, embrace those closest to me, listen to less news and more music. Maybe that's what I'm going to say, less news and more poetry. You started out tonight with us. So the poems I chose were on some of the things she referred to in there. I chose a poem about just reading and breathing, and I'm not ready for action. I'm ready to kind of live with what's happened and try to integrate it, and also feel the devastation that I feel. Another, so I've got a poem on that. I didn't write it for this occasion. It's in my book, Belongings. Another one about another really wonderful thing to do is to be outside in the natural world. So I have a couple poems on that. As wild a place as you can find. And another is to paint, draw, write, do something creative, dance. And a fifth thing that I refer to in a poem is to go into your memory bank of meaningful experiences from the past, especially sensuous ones. And another is to be close to an animal. So I'm going to end with an animal poem. Because the program is, I'll read for about 10 or 12 minutes, and no, less than that. And Joyce will read about the same, and then we'll have a little conversation about what we don't yet know. It'll bubble up. And then we'll each read a poem to close the night, and thank you for coming again and being with us. So this is called Gift from the Sea by Anne Morrow Lindbergh. That's the title of the poem, Gift from the Sea by Anne Morrow Lindbergh. Beloved book of my landlocked mother, I drew from my bookshelf today to read and borrow from Anne, who learned from saints' language of longing to live in grace. Like Anne, like my mother, I'm a woman busy with life's errands, its dust and caring. No time to hermit like St. John, who followed a light, or to walk the El Camino de Santiago as a pilgrim. For a brief rest, I robe in loose cotton clothes, sit outside in leaf-filtered shade. After a chapter of reading, I lay the book in my lap. Silent amplifies the wholly present sound of birds whirl, lisp of dry grass, and breathing like tides of a sea. Another going outside, being in the great outdoors, the truly great outdoors, is called Owl of the Back Pastures. With a wallop, the magician opens a folded top hat so large the night and its torn pieces of stars fall in. Our conversations rise and fall. Do you call that star Venus? My father says so. Do you still climb rocks toward those stars? Not since my friend died, now I dance. Some moonlight is caught in a cylinder, that white finger of tree peeled clean. The startled owl startles us, lifting from a stark tree its wings gulp air, as if darkness swallowed a bit of itself, making the dusk brighter. The bird's shape burns. At the moment of takeoff, the owl is all there is, with its gigantic wing spread and fright. A glide of dun feathers gone, a bird of magnitude living its nightlife in the solitary back pastures, a vanishing act of great beauty. In a poem about, if you put down for the time being your drawing or your painting or your any activity that gives you you put into your hands or through your head and heart, get busy at it again if you can. This poem is called Art, and it's from it's in the book, but it's from my book called Shelter. That during that difficult time of COVID, my friend and I, we exchanged. She sent me a piece of art, a painting, and then I responded with a poem, and we went back and forth for 15 exchanges, 30 exchanges in total, and got me through that difficult time. She is the artist and I is the writer. So this is a poem from that, the one that begins the book, A, because it's in alphabetical order. Things that you think of as sheltered, like art, and regular ones like bus shelters and things like the houses are all both illustrated and also written about in the book. So this is the art one. As the sun begins to build its house of gold, an artist is called to her window. Alone in the attic of creation, free to leave her body, lift bird-like and settle on bare branches, she can portray what is before and within and beyond herself. With pencil, paper, color, she paints an upside-down bowl of blue essence some call heaven. Anne Frank, too, in the bolt hole of a tiny annex, found her patch of sky and shared her vision. Think of all the beauty in yourself and everything around you and find your way to be happy. This poem is the one that responds to that admonition I had earlier on, based on the poem that was put together from slips of other poems about remembering a sensuous experience of the past. So this is called Bean Fields. They labor across the straight lines of parallel rows. The farm boy, the town girl, earning an hourly wage for her college fund, weeding, staying even with each other, loving like crazy each other's smell. He has the slight acrid burn of green leaves, and she cat mint, residue of shampoo, her hair streaked shades of brown like foxtail grasses in the sun. His tom body yowls in the backyard of his brain that he wants that minty weed. She longs for the end of the row where they will sit in the bed of a dirty truck against warm rubber tires and drink lemonade with tongues so keen you could map the exact spot where the sugar of desire does its dream business, where the lemon pulp, let's call it her education plan and his religious training, persists in its tart denial. A bean in its ripe casing hangs on a stem, 3 fuzzy lumps in its throat, one for the boy, one for the girl, and one for how the hinge of what might happen swings slightly, opening here and closing there. You know that wonderful poem, Walt Whitman's Song of Myself? It's this big brag in the world, Song of Myself. And in fact, I don't know if you know, but Walt Whitman was so big and set on his own writing that he wrote his own blurbs on the back of his book. Finally, we found the big American voice. Finally, we found Margaret Hasse here, and we can say her last name right. But so I was thinking about several poems that I always like to come back to, and one of them is that Song of Myself section where he writes, "I think I could turn and live with animals. They are so placid and self-contained. I stand and look at them long and long. They do not sweat and whine about their condition. They do not lie awake in the dark and weep for their sins." So I took that as my inspiration, thinking about being around animals. If you could just go hang out with some animals right now. Some of you I know might be ready to get organized and take action in some way about what's happened, but I'm not ready yet. I'm just kind of living with it, I guess, and thinking that's also something I need to do. So this last poem in this set is called St. Francis Pet Cemetery. Under our dog's tongue, the stone of a tumor. We always fed her dry food, but now offer a death row diet. Whatever the pooch wants. Meat scraps from our plates, casserole with rice. We walk slowly, let her go unleashed, stopping in a pet cemetery. A granite statue of St. Francis stands watch over the tombstones. He who named the wolf believed in the souls of animals. He raises his hand to bless them all. We'll be back soon to plant ashes among the grave markers, remembering Teensy, a terrier, Busy Bob, a hamster, and on a cross made of popsicle sticks, Spaz the guppy swimming forever.
That was wonderful. Margaret is always wonderful. So it's so nice to be here, and it's so nice to see all your faces, familiar from all different places. I don't usually rhyme, but that did. So I'm not going to say very much. I'm going to just read as many poems from the book as I can. But I just first want to say that now I have a trilogy. First words, afterwards, and homewards. Only the last one is a pun, I think. Homewards. I'm going to actually read from the book. I rarely do that. Oh well, they're fine. Just flip around and be not unscathed. So the first, I'm going to just kind of go chronologically through, and I'll watch. Somebody watch the time. Where's Michael? Okay, you'll let me know.
Absolutely.
Okay. So the first poem is called American Gothic. And so just summing up that famous painting by Grant Wood and the man and the woman with the pitchfork, or who, I'm not sure, he has the pitchfork, I think. And it's called American Gothic, and the epigraph is Louise Glick. We look at the world once in childhood, the rest is memory. At least once they posed for a photograph in that American Gothic style, mother looking to the left, father father straight ahead, but they were never that kind of people. They wanted their dog, a big blonde doggy sort of creature, in the picture with them. And somehow, in the attempt to arrange themselves, they lost their balance and they all tumbled down, laughing and barking at the same time, unhurt. I took that picture, and and then another. It was the same day as the one on this cover of this book, but the sky was bluer, the grass was greener, everything was more itself than here in the half light that makes a memory. You, dear reader, will never know a place like this one, that one, but I've tried to get something of it into these poems. Things change. Everything changes. It took a while to learn that, and what comes after that too. I need a little drink of water, and I'm focusing on looking at the words. I get terribly distracted by the audience because I look up to see faces I know, and it just makes me half step off. But it's so nice that there was water here. So, second, okay, so not too much explaining. This one's called Autumn Again. It is autumn again, season of mists and all that Keatsian color. The tiny gnats and the mosquitoes hover in the breeze. The geese who arrived in pairs one Sunday in May now fly high in the October sky. It is autumn again. My father sits on the porch, listening to the almost inaudible sound of field choppers chopping a field of corn he did not plant. Soon he will be 90. I tell him about the fields I see between Chaska and St. Peter, how the corn stalks have gone from green to gold, how the ears hang down heavy, the ripening rows of kernels wrapped in their layered husks. It is autumn. The grapes are ripe and purple-black on the vine. I break off a cluster and walk back to the house, eating them slowly, staining my fingers and lips with a juice that is both sharp and sweet. And Big Tractor, the Big Tractor, was a Farmall 460, plow rating 4, which was twice as big as the H, and 4 times bigger than the B. I like the H better, just better. Oops, I just mixed, I skipped a stanza. First reading on this, excuse me. It started with a key, just like our car, and it was two-toned, red and white, and boxy, like a Nash. I like the H better. It was perfect for raking hay, trailing the wagon to pick up bales, and cultivating corn. I was happy for my father when the Big Tractor arrived, along with the new field chopper and a silage wagon, but my heart was with the old machinery, waiting at the edge of the woods like old soldiers ready to serve again. Okay, so that's a little bit, one more poem about my dad. Both my parents when they were in their 90s. And they really lived good lives and sweet people. After the first snowstorm, he would have been up for hours by the time I finally rose. His tractors ready like those courteous male bowerbirds in Elizabeth Bishop's poem. Or he would have gotten up in the blue-black cold to stoke the furnaces before going out to open the roads. Once, or perhaps repeatedly, he said it might have suited him to make a living writing novels or studying law, that it would have been a relief to do something that had no dependency on rain or snow. Where are you now, my father, as the first snow begins its soft descent? What clearings have you come to? My mother doing nothing. My mother turns 85 today, and she emails to say that she hasn't accomplished a darn thing. At noon, she said she'll meet two of her sisters, the eldest who just turned 90, and the youngest just back from Arizona, along with my sister and maybe one of my brothers. After lunch, my mother and father will go back to the farm and play cards in the spotless kitchen, curtains fluttering in the open windows. My mother will get up often to pour coffee or cut pieces of a rhubarb crisp she made yesterday when she says, she didn't do a darn thing. Darn isn't in there. She didn't do anything except volunteer at Catholic Charities or put in a few hours at a consignment shop. Later, she'll put together something for supper, a casserole she made earlier when, as she claims, she didn't do a thing, accompanied by a salad she made out of greens she grew in her garden when, as we all know, she was absolutely idle, and bread she made in the morning out of nothing, of course, with no effort of any kind. My mother's birthday, born June 6, 1929. It always came when I was in a hurry, classes ending or grades due, the bookstore waiting for September's order. Bookstore waiting for September's textbook order. My mother, born the same year as Anne Frank, Bill Evans, Jackie Kennedy, and Martin Luther King. My mother, born the year of the stock market crash when the Great Depression began. Fourth child out of 13, red-haired and passed over, didn't expect a handsome husband and a big house, but that's what she got. Why is it I only think of things I'd like to ask now? Did I think she would live forever? Yes, I must admit, I did. My mother reads Willa Cather. When my mother fell in love with my Antonia, she was like a teenager who had just discovered sex and rock and roll. She read all morning and all afternoon. She forgot to make a cake for the daughters of Isabella bake sale and decided that pizza would be enough for lunch and dinner, except she called dinner supper, just like Antonia did. Reading, she forgot to watch Andy Griffith and Jeopardy because she was in Nebraska, working in town where everything was new and exciting, which is why, because she loved it so, she was going to take that book to bed. So, plumage about. And the pattern. Some days after school, my sister and I went down to the fabric department in Fandles and paged through the pattern books, Vogue, McCall's, Butterick, and Simplicity, dreaming of dresses only we would wear, assuming that our mother, who had 7 other children, a big house and 2 gardens to take care for, would find time to make the safari jacket that was all the rage in 1966, which she did, sewing into the night while we read Thomas Hardy and George Orwell at the big kitchen table or sat in the sunroom at the piano. She made certain we knew how to play. There's another one called Ingratitude, but I'm gonna skip that. And I'm gonna just turn, because I just heard a minute or,
Or last poem, whatever works for you.
okay.
Last couple.
I'm gonna read kind of a poem that summarizes a whole section of the book. It's called Houses in the Fields. Do you know that album by John Gorka? I think it's called Houses in the Fields. It's an elegiac, beautiful piece. But mine it has a funny couplet at the end, or at least I hope you think it is. Last year this land was all oats and corn. But now there's a row of houses built so close together you can barely drive a small tractor between them. There's a quick trip where there used to be a farmyard, and next spring there'll be a Costco up on 41. Now in every house, the cry of the quarterback drowns the dove's lonely call, and deer quietly eat the landscaped yard. Football players on a giant screen pace and yell. Fans drink beer and eat salsa, where we once walked through alfalfa. That's a strange poem to end on. I think I'll read one more. This one is for Ted Kruser, who wrote a really fantastic book called Flying by Night. And so that poem's in here, but you don't have to know that or know. But I do put some rhyme in this one, so see what you think. Single star. Once they were each points of light in a faint constellation, visible only to passengers flying at night. You were right about the farmer and how his place revolved around the yard-light single star. I lived within the circle of such care and know what endless work it took to put it there, to keep it there. But now those farms are nearly gone. The big machines need big land to carry on, and time, with its sharp, slow decay, rots roof and porch and blows the rest away. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, Margaret, your book is a new and selected, that genre, and I have one of those in it, and I just want to know if you had as much fun putting it together and going through your old books and picking the 20 or whatever number of poems you had that in each section.
And thanks, Joyce, that's a good question. Can you hear me? Can you see me? So, we can stand up,
here and just
if
talk
that's
to
all
each
right.
other,
Okay,
I'll
like
lean
this,
in.
and then, and then we'll sing a duet.
And do a little dance.
You do that. Yeah, a new and selected, you sort of, I'm interested that you did yours, I think, a number of years ago, and I feel like this is something you do, and then
Oh,
it's
and
kind of
that's
a goodbye or
And
something.
no, it's another thing we can talk about, like, we've both lived in the Twin Cities during this time, but you had different rhythm or kind of pattern in your time that you wrote more, and you know, and I was busy with kids and Suzuki lessons and, you know, things like that, and you were really writing a lot and being part of the literary scene. I know that new book about the Minnesota poetry scene by Mark Gustafson. What's the title of that?
Sowing the seeds,
Yeah.
isn't that right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, you're probably in that, and I was not anywhere in the scene, so, you know, that's kind of fun.
It's very fun. I love that book. Gustafson's been passionate about Robert Bly for many years, and he's working on the biography, and he's doing it in pieces. And yeah, I moved here from California in 23, when I was 23, so 1973, and the Loft had just gotten started the year before, the Loft Literary Center, and I'm so lucky because it was there. Early on, I was a teacher there. There was the Poets in the Schools program. Early on, I was in the Poets in the Schools program. There was a prison program. Early on, I was involved in that, and writing and teaching and getting to know poets. And so it was a really exciting time. And where was I going with that? I like the book, this history book, and, because it just brings all of that back. And yes, I am in there quite a bit. But then you're the second wave.
Yeah, I know, I'm
You're the second
not
wave.
in there at all, and because I hadn't written any of those poems that were in my first book yet.
Although something related to that, when you said you were having family and children, so I had a book come out from New Rivers Press, and then a couple years later, another book out from Milkweed Edition, and then there was a 20-year gap in my publishing history. What do you think happened?
I think
I had children and a family, and I
yeah.
was taking notes, but I wasn't doing much publishing in there, so that I know how that works. It's really hard for many women to juggle.
I remember Carrie Waterman signed my book and said, someday you'll have time, you'll you know, just hold on.
Well, and you held on, and then whew, your star just rose wonderfully.
Well,
I was thinking about your trilogy, that we don't have that many poets who have taken a place and made it so, writing about it so tenderly, the farm in Stearns County where you grew up and where your family is described. I mean, think of like Spoon River, that was, you know, of the people dead in graveyards. What other, Willa Cather, who made that part of Nebraska, is so interesting and you know, for us. But you've done that for Stearns County and for a place in Minnesota. I just think it's extraordinary.
well, gosh, thanks.
And we'll have it for all books in your trilogy are focused on that farm.
Mhm.
And so it lives in your pages, so it lives in you and it lives in us. So, but it brings me to a question, which is, when I was putting together my new and selected, and I had friends who helped to select the poems.
Me
that are
too.
yeah. But when I read from it out loud, it started to feel like it was an autobiography of my life, and I don't think poems are always should be taken as autobiographical. But do do you take your own poems as autobiographical?
Well, some of them I do, and I would say I have another trilogy, but it would probably be Naming the Stars, Modern Love and Other Myths, and that other light. And and there the poems are more lyrical, meaning that there's narrative, and then there's lyrical, which is more hold this. So narrative just goes on, but lyrical spins around a topic, and it kind of intersects. It's like a little planet with orbits all around it, and the narrative along train. And so, in writing about the farm, mostly they're narrative, but I mean, I've written lots of sonnets, and sonnets tend to stay in the same place and then maybe change a little bit, turn itself upside down at the end.
Do we take then, like I was looking at writers who are talking about poetry's role in political times, and Plato said something about, I don't want any poets in my
Yeah,
kingdom
Plato.
because they know how to turn lies into truth. And I thought, oh, is that, but is it, do we, I mean, we don't feel like we have to tell the truth as it actually happened, as we're not reporting on our lives. Stanley Kunitz said that he believes that poetry is a type of mythology about the experiences that we have. Do you feel that's true? A mythology?
Well, I know I'm not a Platonist, and I'm not exactly Aristotelian either. I think that poetry, William Carlos Williams said, we don't get the news from poetry. I mean, but people
Die every day
die
for lack of it.
miserably
Yeah.
for lack of what is found there. And I think that it is the same as it is in memoir and other things, that sometimes you make a true, you put things together that arrive at the truth that you wanted to say. There's so many good quotes about poetry. Don't get me started, because I've thought about them a lot, and as I know you have. But I think poetry doesn't tell the exact truth, but it doesn't lie. I don't think so. Let's
We
take
could keep
something.
chatting,
Yeah,
but
let's ask
do you
questions.
have any questions? Is that what you mean?
That-
Does the audience,
yeah.
does anybody have a question? And then we're going to our third set is just each one poem to kind of close. Unless you have any more questions of me.
No, I'd like to hear.
Yes, Jill.
Yeah, so I've been listening to a lot of writers and poets. Can you hear me? Okay, and talk about their work and their process. And some writers say, oh, I hate writing, I like having written. And other people love the process. And I'm wondering, what's that like for each of you? And what is your process? Do you have a discipline, or is it more as it comes to you? So do you like it or avoid it?
Well, yeah, I sometimes avoid it, sometimes I like it, it's not always even, but I'm a diarist. I started a diary when I was, one of those that has a little lock and a key, when I was like in grade school, and stay out, on it. And, so I've written a diary since then, and then it became more sophisticated. It was a journal or notebook, but still it was pretty much the same thing. Less about which boys liked me or not, but still there's some about which boys like me or not. But, so I write in a journal almost every day, and out of that often comes, I'm writing about some everyday thing or some, and there's just is a sense that this is going in a different direction. It's the language gets more interesting, it gets tighter, and I often then will go back to that journal page, take that section out that feels like it's got more electricity or more energy to it, move it to some another piece of paper off of out of my journal, and then start working with it and trying to revise it and work on it. I wish I were a more thrifty poet. I have friends who they make a poem out of almost every draft. I would say I'm like a batting average. I mean, I'm one out of every, I don't know, 6 poems are drafts I would say I keep and feel pretty good about. Your process, yeah.
I'd say 1 out of every. No, I have, my process has changed. Lately it's been kind of hard because I have Parkinson's, and I have a really hard time typing now, and writing, but that's how I think. That's how I find what I think and believe and feel. And I used to keep a real detailed journal, but mostly my journals are drafts of poems, and they're very messy. It's really, I don't know if I want anyone to ever see them, but when I know what it's like to work and just work and just have the drafts there and nothing too much is happening. But I also, and I'm sure you do too, know how it is when you just pass a little click or something and a poem just goes down the page, and you don't have to do too much any work with it. It's there, and you didn't even really write it. I think my best poems are like that. But one thing, I think if you know me, you know I memorize poems, and that's really, I also think, that kind of, it gets down in your bones, and so, that time of year thou mayest in me behold, you can do, yes, and do that all different styles. That's fun. And well, we should ask for another question.
It's probably time, I don't know where Michael is, to, what about, do you want to recite a poem from heart and then
No.
read your poem? You don't want to, okay. Do you want to read one of your poems, or I'll
Yes,
read mine and then you'll
yeah.
Okay. I was trying to think which one, and I was thinking, how would it fit with what you're doing? Would it be a poem that wrote itself, or, I'm looking at my book, I was almost gonna open a page and try it and see.
Just
What
anywhere.
are you going to read at the end?
I think I'm going to read a grandchildren poem.
Grandchildren poem, that's pretty different. What if I read a neighbor poem?
Can I request one?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to read it, but I opened it to Another Day of Being White with the neighbor who forgets I'm a black kid's mother.
Yeah, that's a
And
hard
I
one
just
to
lost
end
it.
on, but, yeah, I think.
You don't have to,
Yeah,
but I
that's
just
a hard one to
thought
end
it was
on,
really
isn't it?
powerful.
But, yeah, one of my books was partly on that theme of, was after George Floyd's death, and there was a sign there that, said, a handwritten sign said, when all mothers were summoned when George Floyd called out for him.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of mother poems, and, what do I want to leave you with? That is a hard one.
That's okay, it was just a thought.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. But, summoned, but I could read a different one from summoned. I'll stick with that, books. The ones I
Yeah.
wanna read are just like,
That,
whoa,
that's
what one?
a nice thing
Um,
about new and selected.
It is, isn't it?
Then you can go from 2024, you know, the next 20 years, right?
That's right. That's right. Summoned. Well, I'll read the title poem. It's still got some of that heartache in it, but it's a little bit different. Summoned early one morning with a few strangers, white, black, brown, I walk in silence to the crossroad where George Floyd died. It's filled with balloons, flowers woven into blankets, stuffed bears, and among many, this handmade sign, which I just said, all mothers were summoned when George Floyd called out for his. My thoughts are with my son, who sizzles with fierce words, not just for the policeman who arrested him after curfew, handcuffing him with zip ties. He's also angry at me because I adopted him, or maybe because I'm white like the cop and he is brown. He refuses therapy, is moving out in the middle of the pandemic with no plans of where to live. At home in another shadowy dawn, a family of crows argue. Soon it will be light enough to see how the maple hangs her head over the grass. I can't imagine the future for my son, so I look backward to see a small boy's beautiful body walking into a swimming pool on tiptoe. As the waters get deeper, he points his nose up like a fox, smelling the air. He has always been audacious and brave. It's something to hang on to.
That's lovely.
But I also my son said to me, my son, who is very similar to the child written about here, it's not
Very
autobiography, but he said, "No, you've got to write another one where I'm doing really well, Mom." I want to get in that poem. So I'm still working on that one. Yeah. So things are going much better. And actually that reminds me to say, you know, you've got to remember that a poem is written, as many of you know who are poets, that in that moment, and in that moment, it's totally true to you. But maybe in a few days later, it doesn't hold that hold on you. So but it exists on the page, so it seems like it's going on forever. But we've got to remember, and he does, he often says to me, "Fine, you know, you've got your truth and I've got mine." So, pretty good. So, yeah, can I hold this for you?
Oh, sure. Oh, and I better hit these again.
A little noisy here. It's gonna be a little noise for you, but it's good. Your specs.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's comes with the time. At the Children's Theater. Okay,
Or should it be-
so
Yeah.
I'll just
You'll do it.
Yeah. So for about 10 years or so, I had season tickets at Children's Theater, and the kids then, you know, I just wanted them to be theater goers and art appreciators. So this is a 3-part little bit about that. They loved Frog and Toad. Frog always eager for spring, and Toad wanting to sleep forever. Frog always ready to leap into things. Toad his opposite, always worried and super cautious. Frog loved swimming in the pond, hot summer days. Toad looked funny in a bathing suit. But when Toad said he had never, ever received a letter, it was Frog who wrote the letter that took the snail with the mail so long to deliver. They were best friends, and that's what we talked about on the long ride home, how good it was to have a friend. And then just this little triptych. I think things in threes are really nice, and my shaking makes this a little hard. Here. Okay, tragedy. Once, when she was about 10, sitting next to me in the theater, a place that she'd been coming to for over half of her life, we were watching a play in which the main character, a girl about her age, dies. When it happened, the audience reeled back in their seats, stunned. None of us expecting death here in the children's theater, which is when she leaned toward me and whispered, "Grandma, is this what is known as a tragedy?" And just one more, comedy. And once when the boys were just little guys, whoops, I'm sorry, everybody, I'm a little shaky. Once when the boys were just little guys, they saw a play called Reeling, in which there were no words, just a silent movie, Buster Keaton style. And though they never heard of slapstick comedy, they got it right away and laughed so hard they fell right out of their seats. Over and over they did that, screaming and falling back in pure delight, the two of them unaware of anything outside the flickering stage, where everything that could go wrong would, and life was just one big pie in your face.
Tonight, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
If you'll just give us 1 minute to go to the signing table, that would be helpful, and then we hope to see you there.
And we come to the signing.
You, absolutely. That would probably work.
We're not signing your own books, Margaret.
Unless they want my signature, which seems unlikely.
Thank you all so much.
You need help?
Let me do this.
Fancy. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. Oh, okay.
Outside of that, all of a sudden, I can remember when I was just a kid, I just seen the farm. One was ours, St. Joe, you know. Feeding cows or whatever, I got, you know, I remember 50 cents, it was a lot of money. To go to spend this.
You never know.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Right here, you said feeding cows.
Yeah.
Where?
I was talking about Bob and Rita's.
Oh,
Yeah, so, my mom's parents, which is the, well, yeah, that's interesting.
okay.
That's how, yeah, so that part.
I know the international M is a 350, 400 book. The other one, she had 480 or something.
Oh, the doctors?
Yeah.
You're familiar with the? I mean, I also remember truckers and that I got to drive them when I was a little girl on my grandpa's lap, like, you know, sit in his lap.
Oh, I forgot the John Deere A's and B's.
Okay.
We were actually John Deere family. Had to have
Did you live in St. Joe?
North Dakota, Farmers South Dakota. Hey, H-A-G-E, like the Hague. Where?
Grew up in Williston, stayed to find out
Way
for a
up
while.
northeast, yeah. Oh, I went into
Okay, we have our social programs.
There you go.
We have football, we have hockey. They don't really cross over.
Yeah.
It used to be that you would play NDSU,
They changed it, didn't they?
yeah, but now NDSU is having serious football teams, so they don't want to get hurt playing UND. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I know.